time you hear a car horn and you laugh out loud, you might be a tailgater. If you can recite the Second Amendment along with Bob, you might be a tailgater. If your hands conduct an orchestra during the big halftime show, you might be a tailgater.
Tune in to Tall Tales with me, Bob Klitzkie, Monday through Friday at 4 p.m., only on 93.3 FM. And you, too, can become a tailgater.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3. The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
As sexual misconduct allegations surround the governor.
The governor's top aide, Melissa DeRosa, resigned Sunday night. This coming a week after a state attorney general report found the governor had sexually harassed 11 youths.
And the Senate will reconvene Monday as lawmakers continue working on the $1.2 trillion infrastructure package. It comes after spending the second straight weekend in session in order to get the deal done.
Democrats in the Senate just want to get this thing over with, but Republican Senator Bill Hagerty is objecting repeatedly to motions that would speed things up. So the Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is not getting what he wants yet.
I'd repeat that Democrats are ready and willing to vote on additional amendments to the bill before moving to final passage. Once again, that will require the cooperation of our Republican colleagues.
Final passage could happen in the wee hours of Tuesday morning.
Fox's Peter Ducey. And Friday's jobs report is another sign the economy is bouncing back. U.S. employers added over 900,000 jobs in July and drove the unemployment rate down to 5.4%. It comes at a critical time for President Biden's agenda, as Democrats are hoping to pass a $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill. But former President Trump says it was his administration that helped boost the economy.
The reason that our economy is doing well right now, relatively well, is because of the foundations that we built. What they're doing and the numbers that you're seeing are because of us, not because of them. What they're doing is a lot of artificial stimulus is being added in, which makes numbers look a little bit better.
Trump speaking on Fox's Unfiltered with Dan Bongino. America is listening to Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Hafaday, this is Josh here at APL. Our expertise and extensive network can help you grow your business and reach out to more global markets. As a responsible carrier, APL is also committed to a sustainable future, whether it's protecting the environment or investing our efforts in giving back to the community. Our dedicated teams in Guam, Saipan, and on U.S. mainland are here to support you. Call 588-4651 or visit www.apo.com.
Two space launches are scheduled for this week. Fox's Eben Brown reports.
SpaceX on Tuesday is scheduled to launch the next batch of its Starlink satellites. They are relatively small devices that, when all of them are deployed, will completely cover the Earth with satellite-based high-speed internet destined to be affordable even in lesser developed territories. That launch takes place from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. Also Tuesday, Northrop Grumman's Cygnus will launch from the NASA Wallops Island facility in Virginia, bringing more cargo and supplies to the International Space Station. Eben Brown, Fox News.
And former child actor Jane Withers, who worked with Shirley Temple on screen and went on to star in a series of films that made her a box office champion, has died. Withers' daughter says her mother died Saturday in Burbank, California, surrounded by loved ones. The Atlanta native was one of the last remaining stars from the 1930s and 40s, the height of Hollywood studio dominance. After a series of minor roles as a child actress, Withers was cast by 20th Century Fox in 1934's Bright Eyes. No official cause of death has been revealed. She was 95. Plus, concerns about the Delta variant are apparently keeping moviegoers away from theaters. Fox's Kathleen Maloney reports.
Despite great reviews, James Gunn's The Suicide Squad had a lackluster debut atop the weekend box office.
Oh my God, is it a werewolf?
Yo, they sent me this to a werewolf? Yo, let me out.
Hey, he's not a werewolf, okay? He's a weasel. He's harmless. I mean, he's not harmless. He's killed 27 children.
The Warner Brothers film with a disappointing $26.5 million in estimated ticket sales. Last week's #1 drops to second place. Disney's Jungle Cruise, bringing in about $15.7 million. And the thriller Old in the #3 spot with just over $4 million. Kathleen Maloney, Fox News.
I'm Mary Corsetti, and this is Fox News.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid.
And their students safe. The department has received millions of dollars to do so. Parents need to know that while their children are safe on campus, the family is safe when they return home. Yeah. I don't know how the headline worked into that. Our view, parents have the Department of Education's word. Not much of an editorial today. Sorry, PDN. Okay, so we're finished with the daily news, and now we go to the Post. Marble Cave debacle shows government regulatory oversight over big business has fallen short. I don't know why you had to insert the word big business there. A little class warfare there, Guam Daily Post. One nice thing about our government regulatory activities, they comply with the Equal Protection Act to a fairly well. They're just as lax in enforcing regulatory oversight over small businesses as they are in large. Ask anyone who's tried to open a new restaurant or retail store or any company that's built apartments or developed commercial properties. The government of Guam knows how to go through a checklist. In fact, the bureaucratic burden of going through regular agency after agency in order to get a building permit, occupational permit and sanitary permit have become so cumbersome that Guam Governor Leon Guerrero has asked Guam Visitor Bureau President Carl Gutierrez, also known as the Carl, to pull double duty as her permits czar in order to streamline the process and reduce delays that jeopardize the success of local entrepreneurs. When trying to open their doors, businesses routinely get bogged down in the minutiae of 1, how many basins does my sink have? 2, is the hood range for the stove big enough? 3, does this case for the fire extinguisher conceal too much of it? 4, are there enough smoke detectors for the number of enclosed rooms? If a fledgling company doesn't satisfy these and many other requirements, the fire department and public works, not to mention public harassment and secret services, and the Guam Environmental Protection Agency won't let them open to customers. Some are saddled with additional costs to either replace or augment already expensive equipment. It's especially disappointing to see the contrast between the micromanagement of local small businesses and the seeming complete lack of oversight on the Guam Power Authority's latest solar farm, a massive project awarded to a behemoth of an international consortium. You know, they just can't let it go, can they, Jose? A mammoth consortium.
Everything is big and bad.
Yeah, it's big business, so it's bad, right?
Must be.
Yeah. Not having enough storm drains could be and has been enough for some companies to have to delay opening. And yet, stormwater runoff was allowed to damage and pollute nearby properties, including Marble Cave, because none of the agencies responsible checked to see if agreed-on mitigation measures were actually honored. Now, I got to make a distinction here. They start out talking about what's necessary to open a business, the necessary permits, licenses, clearances, etc. And then when they come to the Marble Cave issue, they don't pursue that anymore. They're talking about what the government's supposed to do after the project has started.
You're right. And that's what I think starkly people recognize that. Except for the Post.
Yeah. So I guess they thought they had two editorials, but wanted to combine them into one editorial. Not having enough storm drains could be and has been enough for as you were. How many construction firms could have used this same honor system instead of going through round after round of inspections by DPW? How many families trying to build homes from the ground up could have saved some money if their contractors simply didn't do what they told GEPA they would do? How many restaurants had expensive discussions about fire suppression systems, Americans with Disabilities Act compliance, and kitchen upgrades for safety reasons before they could serve their first official customer? We hope the directors of these regulatory agencies and governor step up efforts to inspect major construction projects, especially since this debacle lets us all see plainly what the worst case scenario of turning a blind eye to them can be. Well, an interesting approach to editorial writing, no doubt. The whole Marble Cave issue and the failure to inspect, check, etc., is more than enough for an editorial. They could have written a Blue Star editorial just with that. Why they had to bring this other stuff in here, cloud the issue, distract from the point they're trying to make, suggest that they want to engage in class warfare, just not good editorial writing at all. Sorry, Guam Daily Post. This is not how it's done. Okay, let's go straight to Demi Codney.
The card.
I'm sorry, we finished Demi Codney. Let's go to the card.
They weren't that great that you forgot you did them.
I guess so. Yeah, they weren't very memorable, were they? All right, so I'm going to do a little bit more on Tall Tales versus Melvin Borah. Melvin Wampat. And then I've got the governor versus GovGuam employees. This one should be a real shot in the arm for tailgaters. And then I've got Neil Weir versus Samoans.
Still
or again, I don't know which is correct. And then some holdovers, People versus Cardinal Bessiou, Tall Tales versus Rapinoe, etc. So let's start out with Melvin Wampat. I keep getting that wrong. You'll recall that this began when I gave a speech at the Rotary Club of Guam a couple of weeks ago. And I pointed out that self-determination and Chamorro self-determination and decolonization are not synonyms one with the other. And I went into some explanation about that. I use the term separatist quite liberally because it's clear to anyone who's paying attention to Melvin Wampat and the commission that he impersonates, that the thrust there is separatism. It's not about self-determination. It's about independence from the United States. So I went into that. I explained critical race theory and what the tactics were and pointed out that the way the separatists conduct business is very, very similar to the tactics used by those who practice critical race theory. And I also mentioned that for the Rotarians, it's necessary to remember or to distinguish between Chamorro self-determination and decolonization because all of us on the island of Guam live in a colony. Chamorro, non-Chamorro, Truckees, whatever. We're all living in a colony. So Melvin apparently didn't like it. Of course he didn't like it. So he came out with a press release that was critical of me. And I'm a big boy with a tough skin. I can take that. Didn't bother me that much. But his press release said that Commission on Decolonization addresses and corrects misleading uninformed remarks on decolonization and self-determination. Now, a government official might have been well advised to phrase that like this: I disagree with the statements and conclusions reached by our good friend, the host of Tall Tales, Bob. He could have said that. But rather than that, he had to insert a little bit of ad hominem into it, showing once again that he's not even good at what he does, because you usually weaken your argument if you start out with argumentum ad hominem. So he sent that out. I looked at it. I looked at the press release. It doesn't even show the names of the commissioners. It has no signature block on it. And if you read it, you come away with the conclusion that it must have been approved by the commission, the Decolonization Commission. So just to make sure, I sent a FOIA to him, asking for the public records that show that there had been a properly called and noticed meeting of the commission, and the minutes were taken. The answer that came back said that didn't happen. That no papers exist. In other words, they didn't have a meeting. This was all Melvin Wanpat, all the time. So he was using his perch at the commission office as a place to broadcast his own personal message, concealing it as the words or the thoughts or the ideas of the commission. So when I got that, I sent a note to the commissioners, each one, and I pointed out that Wanpat was misleading the public, that he had coaxed 3 commissioners, Bavacqua and 2 others, into violating the Open Meetings Act, that the 3 of them had violated the Open Meeting Act, and so on. I've read the letter on the air. No response yet, but it's good that there's no response, because in order for the commission to respond now, they'd have to repeat the same error that got them to where they are now. Either Wanpat would have to respond in the name of the commission, or the commission somebody would have to respond without having a meeting. So the commission meets on the first Tuesday of every month, which will be September 7 this year.
Tomorrow. Tomorrow would be, it already happened then.
Yeah, we've already had it. Yeah, it's already gone by. So until then, I guess I'll be patient. I don't think I can do that. You know, I have a confession to make out there, tailgaters. I've never had any patience. I never want to have any patience. To me, patience is a vice, not a virtue. It serves as a good camouflage for timidity. I am, if you haven't guessed this by now, I am not a timid person.
I thought you were going to say because your handwriting's too good to have patience.
That's right. That's the reason I had to go to law school instead of medical school. My handwriting wasn't bad enough to get into med school.
But now I understand virtue versus vice.
Exactly. So I'm back to the drawing board, because my usual approach to things is if you find yourself saying, I was waiting for, you're probably doing something wrong. So I'm contemplating my next move, which will come rather soon. Now, one of the things that I did do was I prepared a soundbite in case anybody wants to stick a microphone in my face. And you would think that PNC would want to stick a microphone in my face, since they ran the story on the Rotary and the follow-up story, and you'd think that the Daily News, for the same reason, would want to. And I sent these papers off to both of them. No microphone stuck in my face. But if one were, this is what I'd say. Melvin Wanpat issued a press release condemning me for wrong-think. The new word of the day, wrong-think. I disagreed with the pro-separatist propaganda that he distributes as the executive director of the Commission on Chamorro Independence. Juan Pat was not authorized to broadcast what the response to my Sunshine Law revealed was his and Commissioner Bavacqua's rap. In the process, Juan Pat broadcast a misrepresentation that was ultra-virus his authority and lured 3 commissioners into a violation of the open government law. That's, in a few words, that's exactly what happened. So I would have thought that that was newsworthy. But
well, look at this. Maybe if you were big business, they would like pay attention.
yeah, or if I were big business and I didn't, they'd be more likely to pay attention, right?
Because speaking as a commission when no commission ever convened is pretty huge. That's not just an oversight. That's a violation.
To me, it is, yeah. And it's the kind of thing that I would think they'd be on like a duck on a June bug, because you know, the only real power that citizens have in the face of government misconduct is the media. And the media has much ability to shape the way government officials perform their duties or don't perform their duties, because if nothing else, government officials don't like to be embarrassed. So when the media decides that they will run something, they're having an impact on the government and the misconduct. When the media decides they're not going to run something, they're having an impact on the media and misconduct. So if this just goes nowhere, I have this mental image of the commissioners meeting on the first Tuesday in September, and if they put this on their agenda, and they have to put, you know, now the new law, the new Joanne Brown law says everything on your agenda must be published in the notice. And if it isn't published in the notice and you took any action on it at a meeting, it doesn't count. It's void. Yeah. So if they put it on the notice and discuss it, this is kind of the way I think it would go. Well, you know, he wrote us a nasty letter. No one paid any attention to it. Why should we change what we're doing? Go get him, Melvin. Good boy, Melvin. Keep it up.
But can you leave us out of it this time?
Yeah. And that stuff about the open government law, obviously, he was either wrong or it's not important or something like that. So continue doing what you've been doing, Melvin.
And more so, this letterhead included the governor's name and the lieutenant governor's name in it as well. Aren't their offices concerned?
One would think so, yeah. One would think so. Okay, so I'll be looking at Facebook to see if anybody wants to chime in on this one. My paper's got a little bit messed up here, but I think I got what I need to go forward with the card. Now let's take a short break while I straighten out my papers.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Chili's is pairing up premium entrees with 2-in-1 entree selections starting at $19.99. Indulge in mouth-watering combos like the sirloin and ribs combo, the ribeye and jalapeno sausage combo, or the savory sirloin and ancho salmon combo. All served with delicious mashed potatoes. Dine in today and enjoy the best of both worlds flavor experience with Chili's 2-in-1 entree selections. Available for a limited time. Chili's on the second floor of the Tumon Sands Plaza. Chili's, savor the moment.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Our next item on the card is the governor versus GovGuam employees. And don't be too shocked when I put on my critical race theory hat as I start dealing with this item on the card. So the governor has announced that in about 3 weeks, every GovGuam employee is going to have a vaccination, whether they want to or not. They got to do it. And if they don't, they're going to be tested once a week, which is pretty good incentive to get the vaccination if you've ever had the test where they stick a Q-tip so far up your nose that you're afraid they're going to poke your eye with it.
Or stab your brain.
Or stab your brain, one of the two, yeah. And if you refuse both, then you are subject to disciplinary action.
To the corner.
Uh-huh.
Go to your room.
A timeout. Yeah. And I was chatting with Ray this morning, and he said, well, would government employees have any recourse if that happened? And I said, well, if an employee were disciplined for it would be insubordination, he would have an appeal to the Civil Service Commission. And discipline means suspension, demotion, or termination. So that employee would have an appeal to the Civil Service Commission. And, of course, we all know that once you get to the Civil Service Commission, an employee might wind up with a promotion after it's all over. Because the Civil Service Commission has this really great tool for analysis. Somebody goes out and kills a pig, and they examine its entrails to determine whether or not management should be sustained. But that's certainly the first. In fact, that is the necessary element. An employee wouldn't be able to file suit until he'd exhausted his administrative remedies. As far as the law is concerned, the law is on the side of the government here. We've all heard about Jacobson versus Massachusetts, a 1905 case that held that a Massachusetts law that fined people for not taking the vaccine of the day in 1905 was constitutional and was upheld. And then I also mentioned to Ray this morning, there's an employment law case called Garcetti versus Ceballos. It's one of a string. Pickering versus Board of Education, Connick versus Myers, and Garcetti versus Ceballos. And what the law is that when the government of the United States is dealing with citizens, it must comply with the Bill of Rights as we all know they work. And we understand how they work because of the case law that interprets them. But when the government is interfacing with its own employees, the standard's much lower. That the government can do things to its employees that it couldn't do to a citizen. Because there has to be the maintenance of good order and discipline has to be balanced with such rights as an employee might have. So under that rubric, I have no doubt that if a case ever got to an appellate court, the appellate court would say, sorry, Charlie, if they ordered you to get the vaccine, you got to get the vaccine. And I also mentioned that, there another possibility that could be raised is that right now we're watching the largest medical experiment on human beings probably in the history of the earth, because the tests on human beings has not been concluded. That's a potential possibility, but it's a weak one. So I think as far as government employees are concerned, they ultimately have two choices: either get the vaccine or take the tests, or get fired, dismissed, or demoted. The answer to the question whether or not the government can do it is the governor can do it is really much different from the question or the answer to the question, should the government do it? And in this particular case, my answer is no. Governments should use the threat of what libertarians call state violence very, very sparingly. And if anything else has a chance of working, it should be used before the hammer. But of course, the old saying, and I think this applies to our governor, if the only tool that you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. So one of the news stories, I think two of the news stories that ran on this, quoted the governor, who said, you know, if the incidences of the virus pick up, I will not hesitate to impose restrictions again. Once again, kind of like Melvin Wanpad, the way you say things has a certain impact, even though, you know, that the connotation may be the denotation may be the same, the connotation may be somewhat different. I would probably feel, and I'm not saying think, but feel better if she said, as much as I know the people will not be really happy with this, and as reluctant as I am to impose the restrictions, if I must, I must. That would be one way of saying it, as opposed to I will not hesitate to impose restrictions.
Very condescending.
So once again, I had this mental image. We're at the rifle range, right? And Lou's got her rifle, and she's sighted it in. She's locked and loaded, right? And her fingers on the safety, just getting ready to move off the safety and put it on the trigger. I will not hesitate to put roadblocks back on Marine Corps Drive and send that doctor who's trying to get from Agania to GRMC all the way to Humatak because of the roadblocks. Yeah, that's where the horn came from.
That's where it was. Maybe he can write his own doctor's note.
Yeah, and that way nobody will be able to read it, right? Yeah. Okay, so so much for Lou and reimposing restrictions and the vaccine, etc. I would. Ray also asked, are there any? The executive order talks in terms of exempt employees. Now, that's once again a poor choice of words, because when you use exempt employees in the HR world, an exempt employee is someone for whom it is not necessary to comply with the Fair Labor Standards Act. An employee can work more than 40 hours in a 7-day period, and you don't have to pay that employee overtime. That's what an exempt employee is. Yeah. For us, exempt employees are what we call unclassified employees. So if you read that and you weren't a tailgater, you'd say, oh, good. My son-in-law is the deputy director of the Department of XYZ. He won't have to do it. But that's not what it means. I think what the governor was trying to say is those who can provide legal excuses for not taking the vaccine. Example number one, a medical condition, for instance, immune deficiency, that would make taking the vaccine dangerous. Perhaps something that lies within the realm of the American with Disabilities Act might come into play. It's possible that there could be a religious exemption, although the case Employment Division versus Smith held that a restriction or a law that applies generally to the whole population can't ordinarily be evaded based on religious grounds, unless you can show that it was meant to zero in on religion. However, there have been a couple of religious freedom cases decided by the current Supreme Court that went the other way. So, if you're a lawyer and you're looking at a problem, you're defending somebody, You go through all of the possible affirmative defenses, and you might be tempted to apply every one of them that you can get around Rule 11 of the Rules of Civil Procedure. Because, as I've said so many times, litigation is a crapshoot, and a lawyer never knows exactly what will ring a particular judge's bell until he tries it. Okay, next item on the card is Neil Weir versus Samoans. This is a match we've seen repeatedly, but I have on the line...
Oh, it looked like it just dropped.
Oh, who was it?
That was Dr. Tom Poole.
Gosh, hey, Dr. Tom Poole, can you call back? Wow, what a disappointment. One of our best callers. Yeah, I see the light going on. Is it him? No, it looks like Gar Keith. R. James. Okay, well, while I'm talking with R. James, Dr. Tom Poole, maybe you can call back because I really want to get you on the air. Good afternoon, R. James.
How's it going, Bob?
I'm living the dream, as they say.
Well, I had a discussion with Ray about this morning, so let me spring it on you because, and this might be the reason why he queried you on some things.
Are you taking an appeal to the higher court after Ray's trial court didn't give you the relief you were looking for?
Well, it was just a conversation. There wasn't really any request for a verdict.
You may proceed.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't there not standing court case precedent that we as adults, supposedly learned, have the right to approve or decline any medical procedure or treatment as we see fit?
The answer to your question is yes. The qualification is that it is not a universal, in all circumstances rule. The best example I can give you of what the rule provides is a 1975 case, the name of which I can't remember, said that you cannot involuntarily medicate crazy people. You find a schizophrenic on the street, and the entire medical establishment says, this guy is schizophrenic, he is incapable of making rational decisions. But you can't give him antipsychotic medicine because the Supreme Court said, if he doesn't consent, you can't do it. And to medicate someone who doesn't consent in the ordinary course of business is a battery, James. Now, there are, like everything that lawyers do, there are exceptions. And this one is an exception. As I mentioned, we've got a couple of cases online here. The leading case is Jacobson versus Massachusetts, a 19-5 case, which has not been overruled, and it hasn't even been seriously qualified, that holds that the police powers of the state, when it comes to matters of quarantine and disease, trump the individual rights of citizens.
Okay. All right. Let me throw this in there that leads actually to two things. All right, let's say that private businesses start taking Governor Cuomo's public recommendation of not doing business with anyone who can't show a proof of vaccine. Okay, so you can't walk into a grocery store anymore unless you've got your vaccine passport. You can't get on a plane and fly anymore unless you've got your vaccine passport. But yet, when you go down to get the vaccine, they make you sign a release. Now, it sounds like Gov Guam employees are really between a rock and a hard place, and my heart goes out to them. But if they're forced to take a vaccine or be quote-unquote disciplined, but then let's say they wake up, one morning 3 years from now and they're glowing in the dark, or they've got an enlarged heart or a shrunken brain or whatever, And
that shrinkage part is kind of scary. James, that shrinkage part is kind of scary for males, but go on.
Yeah. In more ways than one. But let's say that, a couple of years from now, people start having, a problem, and it's actually traced back to the vaccine, then, wouldn't that open the door for employees of someone who, even if it's not GovGuam, a private employer, who said, this is our mandate, you get this, like healthcare workers, you take this vaccine or you're out of here. Wouldn't that open them up to come back for a work or a job-related injury case? Just saying. It might be
of course. If you took the vaccine and you got sick because of the vaccine, that's clearly a job-related illness, yeah.
Yeah, if they mandated that you had to take the vaccine.
Well,
okay.
Yeah, right.
Okay. And then on a non-job related side of it, I understand that one of the things that makes America great is you have the right to hang that sign in your establishment that says we reserve the right to not do business with anyone for any reason.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Okay.
Because the record, hold on, James, hold on. The record must be set straight on that. Tomorrow, if I remember, I will bring the statute. We have a statute that's been on the books ever since. It says if a law-abiding person comes into a business to do business, you cannot refuse service, period.
Okay.
And people that post those signs, you're not going to run into trouble. You're not going to have a problem because you put the sign up, probably. But you are going to have a problem if you say, you can't come into my store, I don't want you in here. Do you see the sign up there? So it's just not a good idea.
Yeah, well, I hearken that to, some people that I've had this conversation with about those signs. They're like, no, this is my place of business. I can tell anybody to get out of here if I want for any reason. And I'm like, well, yeah, nothing's ever a problem until it becomes a problem type situation.
Yeah.
That's the reason why you can't tell people of color that they can't sit at the front of the bus anymore, and that's the reason why you can't tell them that they have to eat in the back alley and they can't drink out of the public water fountains and all that kind of stuff. I mean, nothing's ever a problem until somebody makes it a problem.
Yep.
But what if they start, like I said, if they take Governor Cuomo's, I can't believe that bozo went on the air and said, this is a new business model that I recommend for all people. And he said, I can't mandate this, but he said, I recommend, I'm sure you've probably heard his quotes, that they do business with vaccine-only people. Okay, so if you can't go to the store anymore and you can't get on a plane anymore and all this kind of stuff, what kind of rights do people have? I took Mom down to get her vaccination. She's 88 years old. I ran her right down here to Rexall one morning when they were doing the vaccination, and they made her sign a release that said that if she had any kind, the standard legalese release, we're not responsible for anything, you're on your own.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if they're going to force me to take a vaccine, okay, or basically shut my entire life down, and I have to sign a release, like I said, if I wake up one morning 3 years from now and I'm 64 instead of 60, and I've got some kind of a serious medical problem that's due to.
Yeah, I get it, James. I get it. Yeah.
Where we're going with this?
Yeah. Well, anybody who provides the release has the ability to insert that condition precedent in front of it. And of course, I suspect that every lawyer in town would advise his clients, if you're going to do it, if you're going to do the stabbing, you'd be well advised to get the release. It's a CYA type measure.
Well, I read, I'm just that kind of guy. I don't put in my name on anything unless I read it. And I sat there and I read it and I handed it back to Mom and I said, Mom, I would sign this if I were you. She said, well, they won't give me the shot if I don't sign it. And I said, okay, go ahead and sign it. I said, but right under duress under your name. She said, I'm 88 years old. It doesn't make any difference, you know. But to people that are not 88 years old, it might make a difference. You know? I don't know. This is, you mentioned a public experiment. To my way of thinking, it's not just medical. This is the biggest psyops that's ever been launched in the history of our world, and it's being launched on our own people. It's not being launched on another country.
And it's working, James. James, I hear one of my favorite songs, "Back Home Again in Indiana." So I got to let you go. So thanks for calling.
Bob, I get worked up over this kind of crap.
Glad you do. I'm glad you do. Thanks, James.
Mezcla, read all about it. Check out Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Tucumán for lunch. Serving up some savory seafood specials such as spicy garlic shrimp, candied salmon, or better yet, the local favorite, snapper or shrimp escabeche. Available only during lunch hours. Make sure to come down and try these tasty specials and more. Call 969-2652 for more info or to make a reservation. Located at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tucumán, Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. A true taste of Guam.
Hey, big news! Now you can listen to The Point on radio.com. And radio.com gives you so much more. Local news stations give you what's going on in your community. Get national news from CBS, CNN, or Fox News Radio. Take a break with one of the hundreds of music, sports, and talk stations. Love podcasts? Radio.com has thousands of true crime, comedy, kids and family podcasts, and more. Listen anytime, anywhere. On your PC, smart speakers, and a variety of connected devices. Or download the Radio.com app now from the App Store or Google Play.
Okay, so here we are again back on Tall Tales, heading up to the home stretch. And Dr. Tom Poole, why don't you call in one more time? No matter what, hell or high water, I'm going to put you on the air. I'll kill a little time here by telling my corny Indiana joke for the 115th time while you're dialing in, but I sure hope you can dial in and tell us about mandatory vaccines. It'll add a lot to the show. So, Indiana, Back Home Again in Indiana. It's a great song. I like it. It's melodious, etc., and it reminds me of all of the exotic places that I've been to in my life. I've been to India. I've been to Indonesia. I've even been to Indiana. It doesn't get any more exotic than that unless you're talking Indianapolis, Indiana.
It's a jungle out there.
Yeah, so for a long time I thought Minneapolis and Indianapolis were the same place. Okay, well, Tom, if you want to call back, we'd sure appreciate your wisdom as an addition to the show. Maybe you can call back right after the big halftime break. But next, I got to go on to Neil Weir versus Samoans. Neil Weir, as you know, is, oh, yeah, here it is. Yeah, I found my article about the governor, but it was stapled to the Neil Weir article. No wonder I couldn't find it when I needed it.
Speaking of people who won't listen to their people.
Yeah, Neil Weir. Oh, and before I leave the governor, I promised you that I would go into critical race theory. Yeah. So the governor's mandate that every government of Guam employee take the vaccine is racist. Because statistics have been published in the paper that, except for Down Islanders, the least vaccinated ethnicity on the island is Chamorros. And guess what ethnicity most GovGuam employees belong to? Chamorros, right? And because there's no equity here, you know, the Chamorros are not as vaccinated as everybody else. So this was just another example of systemic racism. Mandate that everybody have a vaccine, knowing that white supremacists will get theirs right off the bat. But the Chamorros won't, for what reason we don't know, won't get theirs. So another example of systemic racism, right, Jose?
And more so, the Commission of Self-Determination ought to write a letter about this.
Absolutely. Yeah, they ought to get out something on their letterhead. They don't actually have to write it themselves. They just don't. The only thing they have to do is keep their mouth shut when people call out Melvin Wanpad. Yeah, so applying systemic racism here, the fact that everybody has an equal chance of getting the vaccine means nothing. We're not looking for equality here. We're looking for equity. And we know it's going to be hard for Chamorros to get equity because of systemic racism in the government of Guam. Yeah. It comes right home, right here to bite us at home. Yeah. I'm not going to start Neil versus the Samoans until after the break, hoping again that we'll get Tom on here before we leave mandatory vaccinations.
Just real quick, Bob, I posted this question on Facebook comments, but over the weekend, of course, we got the mandate for executive workers from the executive administration workers to get vaccinated or a mandated testing every week. And then we have a video that the governor says that even those who are vaccinated are susceptible to reinfection and spreading the virus.
Yeah.
So how come only the non-vaccinated are mandated to be tested?
Is that what she said?
She didn't say that, but she did say that, yeah, she did give that caveat that even if you're vaccinated, you can still spread the virus.
Okay.
I think she was talking in context of wearing a mask. That's why they're mandated.
I see. Well, we should never second-guess the governor when it comes to mandates. She's working on a book right now. Some mandates I have issued by Governor Lou Leon Guerrero.
I don't want to go on another mandate with her.
That's pretty sexist, isn't it? Yeah. Should be person date, right? All right, so who we got here? Yeah, we're up at the halftime break already, so no problem.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Quitting Cuomo. I'm Mary Corsetti, Fox News. A longtime fixture in New York Governor Andrew Cuomo's administration announces her departure.
Governor Andrew Cuomo's top aide, Melissa DeRosa, has resigned less than a week after the New York State Attorney General released a report concluding Cuomo had sexually harassed 11 women. Cuomo, a third-term Democrat, faces possible impeachment and calls for him to step down. In the wake of the report, Cuomo remains defiant, claiming he's innocent of the accusations.
Fox's Jackie Ibanez and the Senate voted Sunday to break a filibuster on the $1 trillion infrastructure bill. Late Sunday, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer requested to adjourn for the evening.
The two-track process is moving along. It's been a process that has been a very good process. It's taken a while, but it's going to be worth it as hopefully we pass both bills very, very soon. The bipartisan infrastructure bill and the budget resolution with reconciliation instructions.
The Senate plans to reconvene Monday at noon. A final vote to pass the bill could come early Tuesday morning. And as students around the country head back to school, the nation's education secretary says some states blocking mask mandates are putting students at risk. Fox's Grenell Scott reports.
Secretary Miguel Cardona says he's contacted leaders in states like Texas and Florida that are preventing masking requirements. On CBS Face the Nation, he says he remains committed to in-person learning done as safely as possible.
I believe strongly that we need to do everything, including our mitigation strategies, to make sure our students are safe. The data is showing us that in places where they're not following those mitigation strategies, we're putting students at risk.
In Florida, Republican Governor Ron DeSantis has threatened to pull funding from school districts that institute mask mandates. Grenell Scott, Fox News.
America is listening to Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
A homeowner's policy protects much more than just your house. It also protects you against claims from someone being hurt on your property. If a visitor is injured at your place, how much are you covered for? The smart thing to do is get the answer today.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Well, a federal judge on Sunday night granted Norwegian Cruise Line's request to temporarily block a Florida law banning cruise companies from asking passengers for proof of coronavirus vaccination before they board a ship. The state's vaccine passport ban was signed into law in May by Republican Governor Ron DeSantis. The law's aim is to prevent discrimination against passengers who don't get vaccinated, but Norwegian says vaccine proof is needed to safely resume its cruises. Meanwhile, a Hall of Fame football coach has died at the age of 91.
Bobby Bowden was head coach of West Virginia football for 6 seasons before going on to the school where he would stake his claim as one of college football's all-time greats, Florida State. At the helm of the Seminoles, Bowden had just one losing season, his first in 1976. That would be followed by a 21-10-1 all-time record in bowl games, guiding Florida State to national titles in 1993 and again in 1999. At one point, guiding the Noles to a top 5 ranking in the final AP poll 14 years in a row. After the program dropped off in the late 2000s, FSU fired Bowden in 2010, just weeks after his 80th birthday. Bobby Bowden would be inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame in 2006, but what he saw as his greatest accomplishment, building a family with his wife of over 70 years and with 6 children, including Tommy, who went on to become a head coach at Clemson, and Terry, who was head coach at Auburn, as well as 21 grandchildren. Matt Napolitano, Fox News.
And another loss is being mourned tonight, this time for actress Markie Post.
Post is best remembered as feisty defense attorney Christine Sullivan in the popular 80s sitcom Night Court.
What is it that I do that's so strange?
Well, how about the time you drove 3 hours to get a Bullwinkle Pez dispenser?
The Post also had roles on ABC's The Fall Guy and CBS's Hearts of Fire. She often was a celebrity player on many game shows, including Match Game, Hollywood Squares Hour, and Password. Post losing a nearly 4-year battle with cancer. She was 70. Chris DeMeo, Fox News.
I'm Mary Corsetti, and this is Fox News.
Diving and seeing our coral reef full of life.
I really love hiking the trails.
I really love going to the beach. The sunsets are amazing.
Your island needs you. Help preserve what makes our island home. Stop those who threaten our wildlife, plants, and environment. Install the free Toka app and report poaching, littering, burning, and other environmental crimes. Call 864-TOKA or install the free Toka app today. This public service announcement is brought to you by the Department of Agriculture, UOGC Grant, and Choice Broadcasting.
Hafaday, this is Congressman Nicholas. Your congressional office would like to remind you that pandemic unemployment assistance is set to expire on September 6th of this year. We encourage the people of Guam to seek out active employment as much as possible, as jobs continue to remain limited, and we want to prevent hardship for our people at the conclusion of the PUA program. Thank you, and see to us, Mahase.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the Office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
And now, tailgaters, without further ado, we bring you the legendary Tom Poole. Good afternoon, Doc.
Yes. Thank you, Judge Klitzkie. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for the trouble. I just wanted to ask you about Jacobson versus Massachusetts. You know, I've been teaching for years now a public health course at UOG and University of Wyoming, their School of Pharmacy. So I'm pretty familiar with this case. I have to go over it every semester, every class. And I haven't actually read the case. I'm reading medical text digest of the case. And I would also want to say that I'm fully vaccinated and did so voluntarily. No one coerced me. But my understanding of the case is that Pastor Henning Jacobson lost the case and was fined $5. That was the recourse. That's what he had to do. He had to pay a $5 fine. He was not forced to become vaccinated, nor did they force him to vaccinate his kids, which was actually his main concern. He had had a bad vaccine reaction himself when he was a child back in Europe before he immigrated to the United States, and he was afraid that his kids could have the same problem. So this wasn't a religious complaint that he had. Regardless, my understanding, again, from these medical text digests, is that the Supreme Court was careful to state that the techniques, the inducements that the states could use to get people to become vaccinated had to be reasonable, and people could not be forced to become vaccinated. And so that's why he was judged, the $5 fine was judged then as reasonable, and that would be much more than $5 now, but it's still not going to be anything like you lose your job if you don't. And so I think this everybody just looks at Jacobson like it's just a slam dunk, and I don't think that was the Supreme Court's intention at all. Again, I haven't read the case, and perhaps you have or could, but from my understanding, the Supreme Court had a little bit more nuanced judgment there.
Well, you're probably better off reading somebody else's commentary on the case than trying to wade through it yourself, because like everything that lawyers do, it isn't written in such a manner as your common sense would necessarily take you to the right place. So the word reasonable is a word that lawyers can have a lot of fun with. So
for sure.
Yeah. So unreasonable would mean that the sheriff can't come and put a lasso around your neck and drag you down to the nearest doctor's office. So if a non-violent, non-incarcerative punishment would stand, then things like losing your job, et cetera, probably would be within the realm of reasonableness, if you see what I'm saying.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. I just don't think I would agree. I think that many people, if you said, we're going to incarcerate you for 30 days or take away your job, most people go for the 30 days. I think that there's
and in some of our GovGuam employees, we wouldn't even know the difference, but go on.
I resemble that. Well, I just wanted to put that in, Judge, so that because you're qualified to try to understand what the Supreme Court actually meant in that, and I just worry that everyone's just looking at, no, the Supreme Court said we can do any damn thing we want, and I just don't think that's what they said.
Yeah, and through the years, there have been many cases that worked in that same area of the law that basically endorsed the Jacobson approach to the public health versus individual rights. So 1905, but it's...
I'm sorry, Judge.
Yeah, 1905, but it's still good law. So what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say this is a little different because this is still, nobody likes to be reminded of that, but this is still very much an experimental vaccine. This is not an approved vaccine. And for me, I don't really see the difference in, like, Secretary of Defense Austin saying, okay, all the soldiers are going to have to get it. Well, I don't know why we can't have soldiers test cancer drugs, too. I mean, they would be so much better than laboratory rats, so much more effective. We could really speed up cancer therapy if we just forced the soldiers to test all those cancer drugs and see what the toxic level is. And I don't see any difference. The cancer drugs are experimental. This vaccine is experimental. I really don't see a difference. For me, that is a real quantum leap to force people to get a vaccine that is not yet FDA approved. To me, it just boggles. Now, I took it knowing full well that it wasn't FDA approved, but that was a choice that I made. No one forced me to do that.
Well, there was a doctor in the government a few years back, Tom, that said we really should use people, whether they want to or not, as medical experimental guinea pigs, so to speak. His name is, let me see, is Mengele.
Joseph.
Yeah, that's the guy, yeah.
The White Angel, yes, I'm familiar with him. I know. Well, and so I don't think that we are at that point yet, and that's why I'm not sure that we're thinking really clearly as we stomp down these hallways, making these mandates and things without really thinking this all the way through. I could go further and say, and I've said this to friends and things, that if we were talking about Ebola or H5N1 influenza that had these fantastic mortality rates of 70-80%, then I would take any kind of bathtub vaccine that you had, because the alternative is so bleak. And my argument would be that this disease, bad as it is not nearly bad enough, in my opinion, to be forcing people, particularly children, to get vaccinated with an unapproved vaccine.
And that's my position exactly. And a little earlier in the show, I said just because a governor, whatever, legally can do something doesn't mean that she should do something. And I think this is a classic case that we haven't really studied it through. One other point that I wanted to make, you got Jacobson on the books and other cases along the same lines. But our system is an adversarial system. So there will be people that are going to raise all these challenges, successful or not, but that's how we bring about changes to these things. We used to have an organization that really went to bat for people on the Bill of Rights, the basic civil rights of the people, but they've really lost their way. That's the ACLU. I used to be a real ACLU fan, but where are they now?
They pick and choose.
Yeah.
Judge, thanks so much for entertaining my thoughts.
Always good to talk to you, Doc. Thanks for calling.
Yes, sir. Bye now.
So we had Kellis. Did he lose patience too?
He just had a question he wanted to pose off air, but he said there are a great number of people who have refused vaccinations for things that are approved.
Mm-hmm.
So what makes them eligible or able to do that but not refuse this vaccination? Is it because of an emergency? I think that's what he was getting to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, the whole Jacobson case in terms of quarantine and disease prevention and public safety.
So do we need a threshold to define what an emergency would be? Because we see these numbers that seem to contradict the narrative, right?
Well, the threshold is determined by government officials that have the power to impose these magic solutions. And, I'm working on something dealing with the Big Lebowski and the doctors. And I'm talking in terms of an irresistible force and an immovable object, right? An unsolvable riddle. And it's the same thing with emergency, for government officials, emergencies create special powers. But government officials have special powers that they can use to create emergencies. And once you start down that road, the only thing that's going to stop you is Lou's roadblock out here in Marine Corps Drive. So we're seeing that played out right in front of us right now.
Exactly.
Okay, so anybody else want to talk about vaccines or the governor or any of these things? I'm going on to Neil Weir versus the Samoans. And this is an article, when I read this, I said, wow, this is really a comprehensive article. I wonder which reporter at PNC wrote it. And, of course, when I got to the end of it, I found out which reporter at PNC wrote it. The editor was quoted, put a comment on there and said, "We don't need no stinking editors. We just run press releases." Well, let me see if this caller here wants to talk about vaccines before I go. It's R. James again. R. James wants to ride the merry-go-round again. Go for it, R. James. Just try not to get dizzy.
Well, I just got to get my money's worth for this ride, Bob. No, I just one quick little comment I just wanted to say, because they're talking about lockdowns again and they're talking about restrictions and all this stuff. I just like everybody to remember that even during the first and the second coming of the Black Plague, the guy that pushed the cart down the street ringing the bell saying, "Bring out your dead," even he had to get up and go to work every day. Okay? People still have to eat. People still had, back then there was no, Circle K and all that kind of stuff. People still had to go out and they had to actually hunt for food. They had to go to the wells and draw water, et cetera, et cetera. They better be real careful with more lockdowns. Anyway, that's all I wanted.
That's a very good point. I'm glad you called back to share that with us. Good point. Thank you, James. And is it time to start talking about compact impact already, Jose? It's our Joe. Another Joe. He wants to talk about vaccine. Go ahead, another Joe.
Thanks. About regarding these vaccines, there's a sense of fear. And the thing is that the government officials, they're confusing people with the so-called science, right? The data, statistics, and they don't seem to be making sense. And they don't seem to be sticking to the proof and the rationale that they're using. And so it's confusing the people, and then it's frustrating the people. And people are, they're in fear. They're scaring them to get the vaccine, and then they don't stick to the science. And like, wait, you scared us to get this vaccination, but now the information is different, and now you're scaring us to do what now? What else are you scaring us to do? And so, it's got me thinking of, forgive me for making a connection, but biblical stories of the mark of the beast, and whether or not you choose to have the mark of the beast on, was it your forehead or wherever, there it is, right? The signs of the times, so to speak. So
I really dreaded a ride down Highway 66 back in the day. But go on, another Joe.
Yeah. There are scary stories about Route 66, right? And I don't know if there's comparisons to the number. Anyway.
There
But,
was actually a highway in Arizona, a branch from Route 66, a U.S. highway, Highway 666. So
and they made a movie, I think, out of it, right, with Lou Diamond Phillips.
it was a devilishly designed road. But go on, another Joe.
Yeah, so it's all fear mongering or fear baiting, or how much can they keep us in fear? And of course, with the government, it's don't let any good chaotic or disaster go unused or whatever. So yeah, people are just in fear, and they're looking to see who do we turn to believe when they keep us in fear, and they say, well, these are the facts. But then
everybody listening right now knows the answer to that. Another Joe.
Right.
Of course, yeah.
Okay, Bob. Thanks for your time. I'll just keep listening.
Good talking to you, another Joe. Let's see. I've got R. Carl and R. Keith. We've got our gang here. Excuse me, I should say it. Guajapaguna gangs, tall tales. Yeah. Okay. Let her go, R. Carl. Most dangerous man in the room.
Hey, Bob. Good afternoon. Yeah, I just wanted to again try to provide a little perspective about this Delta virus, and I've mentioned probably maybe once or twice about my favorite article, which is by Dr. Stanford University of Medicine professor Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, and his excellent article in Imprimis. You can look it up online, A Sensible and Compassionate Anti-COVID Strategy. So quickly, there was, early on, there was under 1,000 cases in Santa Clara, where he's from. Him and, his team did a randomized study of, I think it was over 3,000 people, and they extrapolated out the results, and they found that there was over 50,000 people in Santa Clara with the antibodies, and 82 other studies were done and came to the same conclusion about the death rate. That's a 0.2 death rate. That's 0.2%, and that translates to one death in every 500 infections. And this Delta virus, although it is extremely infectious, I saw one study that was put out where it was over 1,000 times more infectious, 1,000 times the viral load. In other words, when you breathe out, there's 1,000 times more of the virus floating in the air. So what this means is that the virus is spreading even faster than the first one, much faster. And in the UK, there was a dramatic spike in the number of, quote, cases. In other words, people who were found by swabbing or hospitalization. And after that spike, the cases dropped like a rock because the virus had spread so quickly that it burned itself out. It was having trouble finding new hosts that without the antibodies. And fortunately, although it is much more infectious, it is not more deadly. It is less actually deadly, according to what I've read about it. So, I just find it ironic that, the original, the alpha version of this virus, as confirmed by 83 studies, comes to one death in every 500 infections. For some reason, there seems to be no interest in natural immunity. If I would go in a heartbeat to take a test to find out if I have the natural immunity, the antibodies, which is supposed to be much more effective and long-lasting than the vaccine. The vaccine, I'm starting to see hints that it wears off after a certain amount of time. So anyway, I just wanted to toss that out there. I just find it very frustrating, very ironic that this miraculous immune system of ours is virtually getting completely ignored.
Yeah, well, did you want to say anything about our governor, or you just want to confine your remarks to immune systems, Carl?
I just, I don't know what to say. I just, I don't know what is going on. They're actually talking in the States. Are actually advising. There's actually people, officials, talking heads, public officials advising parents to wear masks in their own home, around their own children.
I constantly
that is how bonkers it's gotten.
I constantly see people walking around outside with their masks on. People driving down the road in their cars with the windows up, nobody else in the car, they got their masks on. So like our James said, this is not only the largest medical experiment we've ever seen, it's the largest PSYOPs experience. PSYOPs, an Army term standing for psychological operations, seeing what techniques you could use to control people. And boy, this one has worked like a charm, hasn't it? We got people wearing their masks around and wearing their badges every day over their mouths.
Well, early on, it made some sense being, cautious and concerned about, this, and that made complete sense. And I was concerned, but the more I learned about it, although this is a dangerous virus for people with comorbidities that affect their immune systems, that is, 70 and over with certain comorbidities that weaken their immune system. If they have low vitamin D levels, vitamin D is extremely, extremely important in the body's immune system dealing with this. I went to have my blood tested to find out my vitamin D levels because I didn't want to just, roll the dice and assume, my vitamin D levels are all right. I live on a tropical island, but there's genetic reasons you can have low vitamin D. There's other reasons you can have low vitamin D, and
the dedication to umbrellas here on our island also plays a role in it. The sun, you can get your vitamin D for nothing from the sun.
Yeah, I go out every morning and I read for a half hour under the sun. In the like between 9 and 10 when it's not too intense. Half hour, and that's my. And then in the evening, I take a supplement too. Not I don't overdo it, but I want to make sure that I'm getting adequate vitamin D because one of the things vitamin D does is it works in the immune system, so to help the immune system prevent the things that cause this inflammatory overreaction. This what they call the cytokine storm, which sends people into the emergency room, sends them onto these machines, that help them to breathe. So it's just ironic, there's no education program to help people understand. These are proactive things you can do to strengthen your immune system. In addition to, if you want to be cautious, that's fine too.
Well, the reason for that is that you don't need to do anything like that. All you need to do is listen to and obey the governor. Everything will be fine. But Carl, let's get a little sun out in Wrigley Field. What do you say?
I'm for it. I'll keep listening. Thanks, Bob.
I feel like stretching. Thanks for calling. Okay, let's head for Wrigley Field, Jose.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Starting August 1st, pandemic unemployment assistance claimants must start searching for work to remain eligible for PUA benefits. 3 work searches a week are required. Work searches include registering on HireGuam.com, meeting with employers, submitting resumes and applications, and attending job fairs. Only a few are exempt from the work search requirement. This includes those working reduced hours, those in training programs, and self-employed individuals. Remember, PUA ends September the 4th. Now is the time. Let's rebuild our workforce. For more information, go to dol.guam.gov.
Okay, here we are, Wrigley Field in Chicago. The sun is shining bright. Who is that I see over there kind of laying on a blanket in the center field? Oh, it's the most dangerous man in the ballpark, R. Carl, getting his daily dose of vitamin D. So my board is crowding up here. I've got R. Keith and R. Carl for another ride on the merry-go-round. Is that right, Jose? And Frenchie. So I'm going to do R. Carl, as you were R. Keith, and then Frenchie, and then we'll give R. Carl another bite on the apple if I can mix a few metaphors here. Let's start out with R. Keith, who's requesting to hitch a ride on the Wuhan virus bandwagon. Go for it, R. Keith.
Good afternoon, Bob. This is I'm really pleased you're covering this topic. I don't think enough people are really being exposed to I guess mixed metaphors myself, to the whole bag of information, the whole topic here. The media is embroiled in a case of fear porn, and the politicians, particularly those of a left-wing bent, are creating a crisis so they can take advantage of it and really push their limits of their power, in my humble opinion. But Carl, in his call just a few moments ago, actually managed to steal a bunch of my thunder, so I'll shorten it to one question. When this got started, and the governor started with her lockdown measures, and I do forget, because it's been a year plus, what her rationale was for, essentially locking down certain businesses, and I just cannot recall. If I remember, it was to flatten the curve so that we don't overwhelm the hospitals, and there's concerns about fatalities. Do I have my memory right?
You're right. You're right, R. Keith, yeah.
Well, in looking, and Carl, referenced this. If you look at the Delta variant mania, and look at the data from anywhere, doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be Guam. Doesn't even have to be the U.S. It could be the UK. The hospitalization and fatality rate just isn't there. It's spreading. Yes, it's spreading awfully fast. But I'm pretty sure I'm not a biologist. The virulence, the mortality rate just doesn't seem there. So are we effectively just turning this into an overreaction to the flu?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
That's the way I see it. And if one were to think about this like a lawyer instead of a doctor, you'd pose the question, all right, we could do this vaccine, quarantine, roadblock, and all those things, and it would work out in a particular fashion. What if we did nothing and allowed the disease to run the course? Because we know that if that were the case, we'd get to herd immunity sooner or later, which is what we're trying to do with the vaccine. So we might have gotten to herd immunity much faster that way than we're doing now. Fewer people might not have died, and we might not have wrecked our economy in the process. But I think it would have been too dangerous for a politician to even let on that he was thinking in those terms, because you got to put the people first, right, R. Keith?
Well, some people first, at least.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's nice to know my memory's not entirely shot. I appreciate your sort of backing up my thoughts on that. And yeah, I really appreciate your hammering this subject out, because I think it provides the other side of the equation that too few people actually hear. So thank you very much.
Okay, R. Keith. And of course, that's the purpose of Tall Tales. We don't do what everybody else does here. If you want if you want the standard radio talk show on Guam, you're in the wrong place. That's not what we do here. Okay, I've got our Carl and Frenchie. I'm going to go to Frenchie, who wants to talk about marble caves and vaccines. I wonder if he thinks that giving the marble caves a vaccine will somehow clear up the water or something. But I'm going to go with Frenchie, and then I'll come back to you for your second ride on the merry-go-round, our Carl. Good afternoon, Frenchie.
Good afternoon, Robert. How are you?
Oh, I'm living the dream.
Yeah, I can tell. And it's sunny outside. So anyway, yeah, the marble cave, actually the enforcer for on what I understand is the Department of Agriculture. Now, Department of Agriculture, it's kind of funny because, you know, it's like a perfect storm when everything catches each other. You only have one dog catcher in their budget. They let go the other one. But then we have an assistant director of the Department of Agriculture who apparently has a lot of time on his hand because he sits on the pot commission, on the decolonization commission, and he finally found the time last week to go and visit Marble Cave to see what the problem was, and then he came back and went to sit back on the decolonization thing. So you have those people that do nothing in the government, that we pay a lot of money, and who are on every commission known to the governor, to basically being totally inefficient. And then at the same time, Little Lou, or like what's his name on Facebook calls her Kim Jong-Lu, is getting again drunk on her own power and wants to reshut everything with the vaccine. But basically, mandatory vaccine amount to a push for a health passport. And I called Ray this morning. I was actually had a kind of a sign from the heavens because I was doing my crossword puzzle, and the question was court order, and the solution was all rise, and that was just when you were calling. So it was kind of fun. So between you and Jim the Woke Moylan and the all rise issue, all those things keep on moving around like in a whirlpool, and things get sucked in this stuff. But basically what we have is that we have had a great mind control, as James has noted, but now we're moving forward to something more insidious, even more, which is body control. They want to force people to have a health passport. They want to force to inject you with things that are, as a Catholic, that I'm totally against because of the way those things were done. And I would
you know what, Frenchie? I don't know if I should suggest this, but I know a way that they can keep track of all of these requirements that they're placing on us now. They could tattoo a number on the arm of every person. And that would make it so much easier to keep track of all these things, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it was done very efficiently in the 1930s and 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And in some sci-fi movies, you actually have the thing tattooed in the back of your neck, so they just can zap you with a thing. While this is kind of silly, at the same time, it's very dangerous because those vaccines are still not real vaccines. They are still trial medicine, right?
Right.
They have a special exemption because President Trump wanted to fast forward the thing. If not, if we had done it the way Democrats usually work, we would still be waiting for another 3 years. But yet, at the same time, technically, they are trial medicine, and you cannot force people to take non-FDA approved medicine. This is exactly what some of those governors, and you look at them and they're all Democrats. It's New York, New Jersey, Michigan, Lou here on Guam, and then now, of course, California, the People's Republic of California is thinking about it too. So this is where we are. Like Carl also mentioned, we have the Delta thing, which is lessing, but they're already talking about the Epsilon variant. And so there's going to be variants one after the other. Basically, the game here is to control not only your mind, but your body and what you can do with it. It's a grab for power. This is why in Europe you see millions of people in the streets, even though they are playing with the numbers. It's literally millions of people in the streets in Italy, in France, in Spain, even in Germany. And people are waking up and they are seeing it. Here in the U.S., it's a little more, because of our labor laws, it's a lot more easy to get forcing people to get legally to force them to have the vaccine if they want to work. But there is a difference between legal and legitimate, and it might be legal, but it sure is not legitimate. And this is a major question of our times that we're going to have to live with until we pass away. No. It's really a challenge, and we haven't seen that type of power grab since Mao Zedong and Joe Stalin and everything, or even Adolf Hitler. And when you say that, they go crazy because they know that's what it is, yet they are saying it's conspiracy theories. But the same people that promised that those things will not happen 6 months ago are the one pushing for it now.
Absolutely, Frenchie. You're right on point, as usual.
And of course, the counter power, which are supposed to be on Guam, the Senate, are totally absent. They rather talk about the All Rise Act, but you just need 8 senators to say enough is enough, but they are not doing it. And this is also a great way to.
Well, Jim Moylan has installed this treadmill on the floor of the legislature called the Rise Act. And he's told everybody if they get in and run on that treadmill long enough, they'll get to the end. And then the governor will pay out money on the Rise Act.
Well, and then Lou thinks it's on the 19th floor. So there is 2 people talking at each other.
Back to control of the bodies. I got a really good post here. Ellen Leon Guerrero says, so is the argument, quote, my body, my choice? She says, so is the argument, my body, my choice, applicable here? Or is that reserved only for killing babies? Asking for a friend.
Asking for a friend, yeah. You can see that slogan actually all over Europe right now. And it's done by people that are not pro-abortion people, but they are kind of turning the argument against the people that have been using it. And if you will notice that most of the states that are pushing for those health passports and those mandatory vaccines are the same states that are promoting abortion and promoting euthanasia. So is there a relation between the three?
Absolutely.
I think it's worth looking into it.
Mm-hmm. Population limitation, the Great Reset.
Look at one of the biggest, the biggest promoter of vaccination in the world is Bill Gates. Mm-hmm. And he has the means and the money to push his agenda. Actually, he was kicked out of India because his vaccination killed tens of thousands of young children. But then his other fascination is population control. So what is the relation between the two?
Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
It's pretty scary. And you saw him with your Soros 2 weeks ago. He just bought the virus testing firms for the virus. So you have a lot of people at play in there that do not have the best intentions in the world. And Lou is a useful idiot for them.
Sure enough. Hey, Frenchie, I got to head for Churchill Downs.
Well,
and when I leave Churchill Downs, I'm going to go to the nearest drive-through and get Jack on the air along with the clerk, the order taker. And then after that, I'll get to R. Carl. So thanks for calling, Frenchie.
Well, bon appetit for Jack.
Okay.
Read all about it. Check out Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Tuman for lunch. Serving up some savory seafood specials such as spicy garlic shrimp, candied salmon, or better yet, the local favorite, snapper or shrimp escabeche. Available only during lunch hours. Make sure to come down and try these tasty specials and more. Call 969-2652 for more info or to make a reservation. Located at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tuman, Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. A true taste of Guam.
Looking for a seamless medical trip to Manila? St. Luke's Medical Center's Pacific Islands Medical Referral Package offers a convenient end-to-end medical travel service to St. Luke's Global City. With the package, they also provide assistance in the processing of your air travel requirements, airport to hospital transportation, and hospital room upgrades, all for free. To learn more, call Phil MD at 671-637-5433 or visit their office in Tumuning across the Baltej. At St. Luke's, we love life.
So here we are, Churchill Downs in Louisville, Kentucky. There's a drive-through restaurant. There's a McDonald's with a drive-through right across the street. You know, Jose, I'll bet you McDonald's had to lay off a couple people when Jack was on jury duty.
He had a limited budget.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Drive-through Jack's on line 3. Good afternoon, drive-through Jack.
Yeah, Bob. It's kind of amazing that my inability to purchase a Happy Meal led to a downfall to the island's economy.
Yeah. As Jack goes, so goes the island.
Well, I just want your listeners to, if they can just think about this in just a little bit of simple terms. You know, before the pandemic, we had this thing called the First Amendment. We had rights, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, which is rightly understood means freedom of conscience, freedom of assembly. And those things were taken away from us. And what did they do? They turned around and they gave it back to us, but not as rights, but as privileges. And nobody has stood up and said anything about it except for people on your show and people who call in your show. And it's a shame. You know, we witness the two branches of government cohorting together in closed doors. And the press was there, and not one of them said anything.
It didn't say boo.
We are in a terrible shape here, Bob, and I don't see our way back. When the government comes back, and instead of giving our rights, we are inalienable rights we've had from birth in the womb. And they take it away from us, and they say they're no longer rights, they're privileges. And we will define how you use those things. And nobody is saying a word about it. It's a shame, Bob.
Well,
I was around during the swine flu epidemic, the first one in the 70s. And I do remember the lawsuits that came out then. And I just don't, I'm fed up. I'm sad. I'm worried about my son's future. And the press is silent. Everybody is giving, these wrongdoers a pass, and they're talking. They're saying that we should just listen to CNN. We should just listen to the PDN. We should just listen to KUM.
Well, the one I like is the science. The science, the science. I was just reading the other day that when the Wright brothers went to Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, a couple of noted scientists said it's impossible for a heavier than air object to fly. Cannot happen. And of course, the science was settled at the time of Ptolemy, when we knew for damn sure that the world was flat, right?
Well, I think, yeah, it's just a bad press that all this flat earthers and stuff like that. But if you remember, the mantra of your show from the very beginning was, you listen to your show, and then common sense. What did you say? Common sense is that metal shouldn't float in water.
Heavier objects heavier than air couldn't fly. Iron ships could never float, and that the world was flat. That's what your common sense tells you.
Yeah,
right?
and science has been politicized so much this past 2 years, and I don't see it getting any better. But I hope that your listeners will remember that we have rights, and when the governor and the government took those things away from us, and when they gave it back to us, repackaged it, and said they're no longer rights, they're privileges, and they put limits on them, your freedom to assembly, your conscience, and press, to be able to pass news from one person to another.
I'm going to keep beating that same drum over and over again, Jack. And of course, what you say is absolutely correct. And I've had people approach me and say, Bob, you're really sticking your neck out. You're the only one that's saying these things, what you say on the radio. And it kind of reminds me of the time that my sister said to me, Bob, what would you be if you weren't a conservative? And I said to her, I'd be ashamed of myself. Jack,
well, Bob, I try to contribute as much as I can. You got backers there, God bless, and I'll talk to you later.
Good talking to you again, Jack. Enjoy your meal. Okay, so let's see. I got about 7 minutes to go. I guess I can squeeze in our Carl for another ride on the merry-go-round. He is, after all, I better, because he is the most dangerous man in the room. Okay, our Carl, climb on the horse there as the merry-go-round goes past you.
All right, Bob. Yeah, thanks for allowing me on again. It's always a thrill. I just wanted to add a quick point about what I said earlier about that virus, and I mentioned that that 0.2 or 0.2% death rate comes to one death for every 500 infections, as opposed to, quote, cases. There's an excellent, it's a good introductory article in the May issue of Reader's Digest. It's titled Strengthen Your Immune System, and it's subtitled Scientists Don't Have All the Answers, but Exercise, Proper Diet, and Stress Management can make you more resilient at any age. And it's pretty decent,
What was the last one? What kind of management?
Stress management.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I get a lot of exercise. I have a very healthy diet. And when it comes to stress management, I always have managed to impose it on somebody else.
Very true. And one point I wanted to make is for all the people that have passed on Guam and also in the States, how many of them, I think in the States it's over 600,000 or 700,000 by now. On Guam it's well over 100. But how many of those people masked up using various qualities of masks? They tried to social distance as much as they could. They tried hand washing. They tried, spraying and spraying off with disinfectants as much as they could. All these safety measures, and they still, ended up with, going to the hospital. Some of them, not surviving. So I'm not advising being careless, but I think In addition, we need to encourage people to be proactive and try to find out what they can do to strengthen their miraculous immune systems. And if, there's a part of this article that says, is your immune system vulnerable? And then it lists and talks about, the various things that make a person vulnerable: obesity, diabetes, cancer.
I read an article here the other day, Carl, that said if 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, you listen to Tall Tales, it would for sure strengthen your immune system, because you would become immune to all of the BS that comes out of the left.
I think that's very true. I think we could drink it undiluted and have no effect. So it's pretty powerful. Anyway, Bob, thanks for allowing me to add a couple of extra points. I appreciate it.
Well, I like to see people on that merry-go-round, Carl, so thanks for calling. Okay, so we're down to about 4 minutes to go here. I think I'll save Neil Weir versus the Samoans until tomorrow. I saw a couple of things on Facebook that intrigued me, if I can find them here. Rick Duenas, the problem is the Organic Act gives the governor powers beyond what any other state governor has. That's why she has the ultimate authority over the federal pandemic funds, again, more so than any state governor. Until we amend the Organic Act to curb her superpowers, she and any other Guam governor will continue to thumb their noses at the second branch of government. Well, interesting point, but I have a different remedy, Rick. We should enact our own Constitution, and we could accomplish some of these things that we talk about here on Tall Tales if we did. But, of course, you know where the roadblock is in establishing our own Constitution. It's the separatists. They killed the first time around. They were able to kill it. And their rap will be, how can we have a Constitution when we don't know what our political status is going to be? But that would be, that would be a way that we could put some balance back into the government. We found out that that the quarantine power is something that the governor exercises by herself without the assistance of the legislature, once again, because of language that was in the Organic Act from the very get-go. I've got an interesting post here from Vincent Pareda. It looks like a showdown is looming over the horizon between the governor and the legislature, with the passage of Bill 75-36 by unanimous vote and a likely veto by the governor. An override by the legislature will result in challenging the legislature's authority to administer and distribute federal funds. Vince, already nigh. Wong versus Kamina. And Rick laid is the one I read just a minute ago, challenging the authority to administer federal funds from the American Rescue Plan. The governor has maintained that the legislature has no legal authority over federal funds designated for pandemic relief. Unfortunately, she's right. Okay, we got to wrap it up. The end of my favorite day of the week, Monday. We'll be back for Tuesday, which is almost as good as Monday. See you then.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Vaccines in need of approval. I'm Mary Corsetti, Fox News. Dr. Anthony Fauci says he's hopeful that the Food and Drug Administration will give full approval to the coronavirus vaccine by month's end. The U.S. government's top infectious disease expert is predicting the potential move will spur a wave of vaccine mandates in the private sector as well as schools and universities. The FDA has only granted emergency use approval of the Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson vaccines, but the agency is expected to soon give full approval to Pfizer. Meanwhile, a debate continues to fuel on whether or not students should wear masks when they return to school in the fall.
The mask debate is now engulfing school districts nationwide. Today, President Biden's education secretary urged governors to follow the CDC's revised guidance, even if some parents and educators object.
While I understand the argument around not wanting to wear masks, without question, student safety and staff safety come first.
Last week, New Jersey's Democratic governor mandated masks be worn in his state schools.
This is not an announcement that gives any of us or me personally any pleasure.
Fox's Mark Meredith. And New York Governor Andrew Cuomo's top aide has resigned. Melissa DeRosa made the announcement Sunday night. It comes as more details are being released from New York State Attorney General's report on New York Governor Andrew Cuomo and the sexual misconduct allegations made against him.
Critics are continuing to sound off, including one of the accusers herself, the woman who is listed in the 165-page report as Executive Assistant Number 1. She spoke out exclusively to CBS and the Albany Times about why she's filing this criminal complaint this week against the governor.
It was the right thing to do. The governor needs to be held accountable. What he did to me was a crime. He broke the law.
The governor's lawyers held a Zoom press conference on Friday, calling the Attorney General's report unfair as they aim to cast doubt on some of the accuser's stories.
Fox's Alex Hogan. America is listening to Fox News.
Connect to Fox News Audio on the Fox News app. Listen to hear your favorite hosts like Brian Kilmeade, Jimmy Fallon, and Guy Benson standing up for what's right, live and via podcast. Just click listen.